Picture this. You're in a solemn 17th century convent. Everyone's deep in prayer, candles flickering, Latin humming in the background, and then one of the brides of Christ suddenly decides she's a house cat, not metaphorically, full vocal commitment. Now, if you're thinking, okay, weird, but at least it stops there, absolutely not. Because instead of checking if she'd skipped lunch or sanity, the rest of the convent apparently looked at this and went, yeah, that seems right, and joined in. Alright, so we're talking about a convent in France. Big one. Exact location? Nobody knows. Exact date? Also unknown. We're looking at somewhere between the 1500s and 1600s, which is a pretty wide margin, but that's what we've got. What we do know is that at some point during that stretch, one nun, and we don't even have her name, decided to start meowing, like a cat, during prayers. Just full-on meow. And here's where it gets properly weird. The other nuns heard her, and instead of doing what you'd expect, maybe asking if she was okay or getting concerned or literally anything normal, they started meowing too. And they didn't just do it once or twice as a joke. They kept going for hours, days, apparently. The whole convent turned into this relentless chorus of meowing that went on for so long the surrounding neighborhood could hear it. Imagine living next to a convent and one day, the usual hymns and quiet prayers get replaced by what sounds like 100 cats trapped in a barn. You'd think someone accidentally let a bunch of strays into the chapel or something. But nope, just nuns, meowing. Now, the local authorities were not thrilled about this. Turns out, when a building full of religious women starts making farm animal noises at all hours, people notice. So the clergy and the local powers that be decided to step in and put a stop to it. But here's the thing. They didn't try gentle persuasion. They didn't bring in a priest for some calm counseling. They went straight to threats, specifically threats of whipping. And according to the accounts, that's what actually worked. They told the nuns, stop meowing or you're getting beaten. And apparently that was enough to snap everyone out of it. Which really makes you wonder what kind of intervention plan that was. No medical examination. No, hey, maybe let's figure out what's happening here. Just meow again, and you're getting hit. So the story floats around for a while, passed along in medical circles as this bizarre thing that happened, but it doesn't get properly written down until the 1780s, when a Swiss physician named Johann Georg Zimmermann includes it in his work about solitude and what isolation does to the human brain. He's not writing about demons or possession, he's treating it as a psychological thing. The idea being that if you lock a bunch of people away from the world in the same building for years on end with rigid routines and zero mental stimulation, weird stuff starts to happen. Zimmermann's basically saying, yeah, they went a little nuts because convents are psychologically rough. Then in 1844, a physician named Benjamin Guy Babington is translating this compilation called The Epidemics of the Middle Ages, and he drops the Meowing Nuns story into a footnote under the section on hysteria. This is where it really takes off as a famous example. Babington's like, oh, you want mass hysteria? Let me tell you about the time an entire convent meowed for days. And from that point on, it becomes the go-to anecdote whenever anyone's talking about collective psychological breakdowns in institutional settings. Fast forward to the late 20th and 21st centuries, and historians and psychologists are still bringing this story up. It's become a textbook case of mass psychogenic illness. That's the modern term for what people used to call mass hysteria. The idea is that in tightly controlled environments, prisons, schools, convents, anywhere with intense social pressure and not a lot of autonomy, one person's psychological distress can spread to the group like a behavioral contagion. Someone starts exhibiting symptoms, real physical or vocal symptoms, and others unconsciously pick it up. It's not faking, it's not demonic, it's just what happens when human brains are stuck in the same pressure cooker together. And the meowing nuns weren't alone. There are other reports from around the same period of nuns barking, meowing, acting like animals, you name it. Some convents had outbreaks of uncontrollable laughter. Some had nuns speaking in tongues or convulsing. It's all grouped together now with things like the dancing plagues, where entire towns would dance themselves to exhaustion. Same mechanism. Stress, isolation, lack of control, and suddenly the brain just does something wild. Here's the kicker though. We don't actually have the original documentation. Zimmermann references it from a good medical work, but doesn't name the source. Babington's pulling from Zimmermann. Everyone else is pulling from Babington. So this whole famous story that gets cited in psychology textbooks and history articles is built on secondhand accounts of an event nobody can pin down. We don't know which convent. We don't know which nun started it. We don't know the exact year. We just know that at some point, somewhere in France, a building full of nuns meowed loud enough and long enough that soldiers had to get involved. And that's the story. One unidentified nun started making cat noises. The behavior spread like wildfire. The neighborhood complained. Authorities threatened violence, and it stopped. Decades later, it gets written down as a curiosity. Centuries later, it's a cornerstone example of how the human mind can short-circuit under pressure. No demons, no possession, just what happens when you put people in a box and forget they're people. If you were an authority in that French town and the convent suddenly started meowing nonstop, would you threaten punishment, bring in a psychologist who wouldn't exist for another 200 years, or just wait it out and hope they got bored? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay unhinged.